Okay, so I'm not the best at making videos, especially when it's stuff that like I have a lot to talk about. But text posts don't get anything across because nobody has the attention span for it, so it'll go faster if I read it off. Um, these are parallels between third wave gender feminism and other forms of feminism, but primarily that kind. Between that movement and the Satanic Panic of the 1980s, the Recovered Memory movement of the 1990s, the cult of objectivism, the most unlikely cult of all, according to this book that I've read that has inspired this skeptical discourse, uh, as well as maybe even a few tenets of creation science, not to disrespect anybody there, but it's mostly in terminology that it uses, as well as an over reliance on tautology and things like that. So yeah, I read this book that I've been meaning to read a lot. I got it from this club that I went to in college called the Secular Free Thought Society, and it it outlines a bunch of pseudoscience and stuff like that and why it's wrong. So I'm going to follow a lot of the main points that Michael Shermer made in this book when I draw my comparisons because, frankly, I have work to do today, so I'm doing this for fun. I can't really be arsed to look up extra shit for something I'm doing for fun, and nor should I have to. I'm going off of stuff that I already know, that I've already researched, and uh, this. So here we go. First things first, there's a big list of things here that I've written out that the movement has in common with these other things. This includes a heavy over reliance on personal belief versus statistically verified conclusions and objective, um, what's the word that I'm looking for? Observation. Um, the feminist movement also tends to react to external stimulus selectively and rather believes anecdotes and bold statements without having any kind of proof to back it up. They also rely on anecdotes as actual evidence, which is not scientific. Now, granted, I believe people are going to be like, but feminism isn't scientific, it's a philosophy. The point of the matter is you should try to put the scientific method to everything that you think of because it's the easiest way to minimize bias when evaluating an idea. And when you throw that out the window, you've thrown the rug out from under your feet. Modern feminism also tends to ignore the fact that your theory influences your observation. If your theory is that there's this thing called patriarchy, it's as bad as the Illuminati and it's out there to fuck all of us with tits, or you know what, not even that. Actually, no, I'm going to go for that because trans people are included in that once they transition if they choose to. But if you're going to say that the patriarchy is out to get all women ever, um, then that's what your observation is going to be. You're going to be looking for evidence that this imaginary patriarchy is hurting society instead of looking at it as what are the problems and let's try and trace the root cause back. You're getting the cart before the horse, if you will. That's also referred to later on when I go down here. Modern feminism tends to misuse statistics and an understanding of statistics, much like the ESP machines. I don't know if you guys know what they are, but if not, you can ask me. But I would prefer that you Google it because it's not that hard. Basically, they were just a machine with a few easily identifiable symbols, and when they were testing for ESP, they would have the writer of the test try and send the image telepathically to one of the test subjects, and then they would fill it out, and apparently over 9 was evidence of ESP, but that's really stupid because it ignores probability and all that. So, um, anyways, feminism will also use outlying statistics, much like proponents of ESP or other supernatural phenomena will use outlying statistics to bolster the movement, saying that that is proof that it exists, whereas statistical outliers should be taken just as such. Um, Modern feminism also chooses to ignore that the observer changes what is being observed. When we're researching societies that we don't know anything about, civilizations such as bush tribes that are still located in Africa, we are changing their behavior because they know that we're watching them. So when modern feminism views different actions, if you make it clear that you're observing a set group with feminism in mind, people are going to have a bit of more of a different set of actions, probably because they don't want to offend anybody, mostly, other than like another sociological thing. That's actually a very important point because feminism is part of sociology. As much as people don't like to say it is and want to say that it's its own subject, it's not. It's a social movement. Therefore, it is covered under sociology, which is a tenable science at best, in my opinion. But that's just my own personal opinion. I'm going to leave it at that. Feminism ignores the fact that the burden of proof relies on their camp still. It's a very famous saying that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Third wave feminism puts forth extraordinary claims such as the whole 1 in 4 women are raped statistic, the fact that women are put down on purpose, things of that nature. We all know what they say. I don't think I should have to enumerate this all the time, but it makes all these extraordinary claims and it tries to come up with evidence, but it's never quite conclusive, which is why there's the backlash from the men's rights movement. Feminism tends to follow a post hoc ergo propter hoc, which is a nice logical fallacy that states that, because something is, this is why it caused that, again with the patriarchy thing. Feminism has a tendency to rationalize failures, which is something that is employed by psychics and people in that line of bullshittery when their powers don't work, saying, oh, it doesn't work right now because it doesn't work in the presence of skeptics. Well, when feminism says, oh, okay, well, the wage gap, it isn't 77 cents to a man's dollar, but that makes sense because of the research that was like this. No, you're rationalizing your failure. You are refusing to admit that you're wrong and moving on because your movement is only hurt when you rationalize a failure versus recognizing your failure, accepting it, and then changing your ideas to be put out for the mainstream society to look at. As we all know, feminism really loves ad hominem and tu quoque. I have a really hard time pronouncing that word. They have a really bad problem with those. As everybody knows, ad hominem attacks literally mean to the man in Latin. And it's basically when, instead of criticizing your argument, they just say that you're a white cis male. Or the second one, tu quoque, is, and you also. So if you tell a feminist, well, you are having problems in your argument because you're not focusing on things that are concrete, or you're sharing too many anecdotes, and they say you too, it's a way of deflecting a criticism regarding the argument instead of accepting it, and by proxy the movement. Modern feminism also relies on a lot of ad ignorantium statements, which goes to a lack of knowledge. So saying, we don't have knowledge on this, so therefore it must be patriarchy, if that sounds familiar to anybody. Feminism has a tendency to make hasty generalizations. Hasty generalizations can cover everything, but it usually covers certain kinds of prejudices like sexism and racism. Feminism doesn't like to admit that, but I think we've all seen otherwise. Feminism also makes the problem of making an either or distinction between ideologies. You're either with feminism or you're against feminism. You either agree with the tenets that feminism puts aside or you hate women. That is one of the biggest problems I have with it because it refuses to recognize the reality that our world is shades of gray instead of black and white kind of thing. Feminism also relies heavily on tautology, which is the process of circular logic. So, let's say, I'm just going to pull something off the top of my head because I didn't write it down. Feminism says that women are oppressed. Patriarchy oppresses women. Why does patriarchy oppress women? Because that's what it does. And it's kind of circular logic is circular because, it's basically stating that, women are oppressed because women are oppressed. And there's that. Anyways, another and last is that feminism embodies the Planck problem, which, to put it shortly, the Planck problem is that we are going to resist paradigm shifts in our knowledge because it makes us uncomfortable. We see that now. Feminism was very popular throughout the 19th century, or 18th and, no, sorry, I'm so fucked. 20th century. I meant to say 1900s, and then I backtracked and whatever. But in with the Western world, it's mostly served its purpose, and it's very hard to realize that that paradigm shift on focusing on women's rights is going to have to change. Especially given the fact that our Supreme Court is becoming more lenient and things like that. It's just not going to happen. So, before we go into that, I'm going to go over another concept called the feedback loop. The feedback loop basically is just one big self-fulfilling prophecy. So it starts with a system, feminism. So feminism starts, feminism organizes, feminism spreads. Feminism spreads throughout society to the point where it reaches critical mass, and the amount of people that it is accused, you're starting to accuse feminism of problems, things like that. I personally believe that's where we are with feminism today, and it's going to be ushered out by a new egalitarian ideal, maybe if society doesn't disappoint me. And then eventually it collapses, which is what I hope we get to here soon. So next, why is feminism like witches? Which is going to be a fairly shorter segment of this video because I don't want to put it over like 15 or 16 minutes because that's boring. Feminism is like witches in that it has underlying socio-political mechanisms that cause it to go. So with feminism, that's things like a perceived gender inequality, the assumption that lawmakers and most people represented are of old schools of thinking, whereas that's simply not the case. The witch hunt in this case isn't women that have been consorting with Satan himself, but an entire gender of our species. And I think we can all see where that's parallel at this point. As far as the Satanic Panic goes, it has a similar tenet of who benefits from the movement. When we look at the Satanic Panic, we have to think, obviously, there wasn't a rise of satanic cults. Who benefited from that? Well, let's look at the 1980s. We're moving forward, technology is progressing, more people are becoming secular, science is progressing at a faster rate than it has been in the past. Fundamentalist Christian organizations are being pushed to the side, so they fight back with the Satanic Panic, because people that aren't on the fringe are still going to be scared about their kids being sacrificed to Satan. So feminism does the same thing in that who really needs feminism? Universities need feminism to keep people going, to study a useless talent. People that lead the feminist movement need feminism. Anita Sarkeesian, anyone. She needs feminism, because how else would she make such an outrageous income? It follows the same thing as a mass hysteria. You know, if you work up everybody into thinking, your reproductive rights are on the line, your freedoms are on the line, you're going to be an oppressed minority soon, people are going to respond. Of course. It's ridiculous to think that people wouldn't. On top of that, it's similar to the Recover Memory movement in that it plants new ideas into already vulnerable minds. If you say you're at a very high risk for violent crime, you can't go out of your house without worrying about being raped. You have to worry about all these defenses. People are going to be worried. So when feminism comes to them saying, this isn't your fault, this isn't just because people are crazy, this is because men hate us and want to oppress us because we're different, or I actually don't know why they think that the patriarchy wants to oppress women, but I've heard several different reasons, such as they just want to keep the power in the line, they think they're better than us, things like that. If feminism comes along and says, you know, they're going to do this because that's the way it is, and then people start to believe that's the way it is, and that's not the way it is. And it holds things in similar to cults in that it has a moral absolutism, like I talked about earlier, with you're either with us or against us. And it also tends to ignore the faults of their leaders or rationalizes them, such as Big Red being a complete bitch, or Anita Sarkeesian spending all of her money on shoes and jewelry and things like that, as well as her terrible public relations with people of the opposite gender. And I believe that the only way feminism is similar to creation science is in terminology. Creation science is not science. It is not founded on an empirical basis. It is not testable by other claims, and it claims for divine intervention, which by itself is anti-science. Feminism claims to be an ideology that works for equality, but in fact the simple matter that it has one gender preferred in the name itself shows that it is not for equality, but for the advancement of one gender over another eventually, in some sort of perverse revenge fantasy. I hope you've enjoyed this fun, short lesson on things that I've thought about all day, thanks to reading Michael Shermer, and if you actually watched it, thanks!